Here at the University of the Virgin Islands. Welcome to the UVI 13D Research and Strategy Innovation Center. This is an investment in the community that was aided by a generous donation from Mr. Kirill Sokolov and the 13D Research and Strategy. So this opened in 2023. And it is here for you, for the faculty, the staff, the students, and the community. I want you to know that this is a place that you can come and take advantage of everything that you see in here. If you haven't walked around, feel free afterwards. Where's Mr. Francis? Anyway, you'll see Mr. Francis. He can give you a tour. We have a maker space with power tools and electronic tools, a vacuum form maker, a full spectrum laser. We have an innovation lab with 3D printers and scanners and music technology centers and all of these things. And everything you see here is for your use as well. So please feel free to reach out to us at innovation@uvi.edu and we'll tell you how. So welcome once again. This is the 4th annual Business Leadership Lecture that we sponsor every year. And so we're happy to see everyone here. It is always a phenomenal time. It just opens your minds and your perspectives. So I hope you are ready to be blown away. I am going to now turn it over to the first alumni president of the University of the Virgin Islands, Dr. Sophia George.
Thank you, VP Wersey. Good evening, everyone. Y'all looking beautiful and handsome out there. So, VP Wersey welcomed you to our 4th annual Business Innovation Lecture. I am very grateful to the team who've been working diligently to put this on, so give it up for VP Wersey, Tamara James, I know is out here, the light's in my eye here, Tamara, and the 13D Innovation team. I'm very grateful to Kirill Sokolov and his support for the RT Park and everyone for making things happen here at the 13D Innovation Center. So it's my pleasure to welcome you. We're also delighted to be joined by students. There were many students upstairs. Hopefully some students made their way down here. Any students out there in the audience? All right, we have Saeed over here, Ashan. Thank you all for coming. Many of our students are here, so thank you for being here. And our faculty. I saw several of our faculty members out here. Thank you all for coming. Wave your hands, faculty. Yes. We also have members of our RT Park board, Eric Saunier, our director, Chairman Smock, our chairman of the UVI Board of Trustees, Mr. Ian Tomlinson, chairman of the RT Park board. Many RT Park clients, entrepreneurs, business owners are here. Thank all of you for making this a reality. At UVI, we're building what we call brand momentum. If you've heard me speak, you've heard me talk about it. It's a bold and intentional push to advance student success, to expand innovation, to deepen workforce, and business partnerships. So this is where you all come in. All meant to position our university for long-term impact. That work calls for imagination, foresight, courage, the very qualities our guest brings to this conversation. Nikolas Badminton, who you'll hear from, is a futurist who challenges leaders to see beyond what is familiar and to engage the future with clarity and purpose. His work reminds us that the future is not a distant concept. It's shaped by the choices we make today. This message resonates deeply with what we're doing here at UVI. Through hands-on learning, internships, research experiences, and entrepreneurial projects, our students are not simply studying change, they're learning how to lead change. Whether developing solutions for local businesses, engaging in sustainability initiatives, or applying technology to real-world challenges, our students are gaining the skills and the confidence to thrive in this unpredictable world. That is brand momentum in action. So preparing our graduates who can anticipate change, navigate uncertainty, because there's a lot of that today, of course, and also to create opportunity right here in the Virgin Islands and beyond. So tonight's lecture invites us to think boldly, not just about what the future may look like, but about why we choose to be leaders who are involved in helping to shape it. So I had the pleasure of having dinner with Nikolas last evening, and it gave me a lot to think about. And I think what you'll walk away from this lecture is also a lot to think about, a challenge to yourself to change the way that we think. Not that it's wrong, but that there are other ways for us to think about what is now and also about the futures that we are engineers of creating. So he doesn't know this, but I wrote a poem in his honor.
Oh, right.
Called Engineering Hope. So here it goes. Nick said, acceptance is as difficult as believing what is. What is missing, what is crumbling, who and what are dying, all that is vying for our attention. There's no denying that life is full of but presidents don't get to say that. They don't get to cuss at the stuff that makes everyone else's chest bust. To me, acceptance is the realization that we're all in this together, that now is our future, and requires us to transcend the noise, the louds, and the shrouds, to see the rainbow through the clouds. Acceptance is hope, waiting to be born, or rebirth from what once was, within our loins, hope lost, torn to threads by double storms, economic downturns, days forlorn, hope of what is yet to come, hope of what is on the horizon, hope of grand momentum, revving, stirring, beckoning to become, first in minds and hearts, in wills, then in steps towards the getting done. The quilt after the yarn has spun, embracing a vision, a reality that only few can see and fewer can dream, but all will experience as a community, because faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not yet seen. Give it up for Nikolas Badminton, our featured hope engineer.
Thanks so much. The last poem someone read me, it was on the news in Canada where I live, and it was written by ChatGPT, so bravo, right? And it wasn't very good, but that was superb. And it was, it actually captured a lot of what we were speaking about last night, and that's wonderful. Thank you all for having me here. I live in Toronto, I'm a Brit, and my story actually starts in a small village in the southwest of England called Martock. If anyone's from Martock, I've got friends there, it happens, trust me. I'd like to hear from you afterwards. But at the age of 7 years old, in the 1970s, kids were playing, coloring books and running around with sticks, and they're playing Hungry Hippos. And my dad bought me this book, right? And I was at home and I was reading this. This is the Osborne Book of the Future, a trip to the year 2000 and beyond. And it was a wildly optimistic book of what the futures could hold for us from a technology perspective. And it was written by science fiction authors and people that were inventors and innovators like yourself. And it was really saying, here we are. We live in this world. We're going to be living on the moon, which is quite apt considering Artemis 2 is going to be taking off. We're going to have robots at home, AI everywhere, Hyperloop. Everything was there. It missed a few things. It certainly didn't predict that we were going to be managing over 100 passwords, right, in modern life, or that I'd have to use two-factor authentication for my fridge. So it's interesting. When you speculate and you look around the corner, you look ahead and you look at those horizons, we see lots of possibilities. And everything is valid and everything is really getting you to think differently about the possibility of change from where we are today. And being here at UVI and being in the US Virgin Islands themselves, it sort of reminds me that we're sort of on the edge here. We're surviving and we're thriving and we're smart and we're punching above our weight. But we're also on that edge of innovation, and the new ideas can come from anywhere. In fact, coming from smaller places is fertile ground more than some of the bigger places where we see other challenges as well. So bravo to the island and for being what it is, and being here is really interesting. But what was really interesting, as I started to think about the Osborne Book of the Future and thinking about this, a lot of this was hype. A lot of this were big promises that never got delivered, right? A lot of this were people trying to sell us things. And we certainly see a lot of noise today. I mean, people say the world is moving faster than ever before, right? Well, I like to think that it's noisier than ever before as well. And we need to cut through that as well. And that sort of brings me on to thinking about what hope is. Now, I call myself a futurist. I help companies look at 5, 10, 20 plus years, help them like supercharge their strategies. But what's interesting about hope and hope theory, it's about setting goals and looking at pathways forward and giving agency to yourself and to people and to create networks of people that do the work of delivery off the back of the promises that we make about the futures that we build together. And that's what the idea of being a hope engineer is all about. I've just written a book on that. It's coming out later this year. And really, hope really cuts through that noise and helps us really focus in. But at the center of hope and futures work, there's 4 things that we do that are really pivotal to doing this. And in the foresight field, it can get quite academic, and there's 100 cones and different 2x2 graphs and a number of different ways of framing the world. I think it comes down to 4 very simple things. And this is what we're going to start to learn what to do through this keynote. The first one is that we scan for signals of change. A signal is an indicator that something could be different tomorrow. It could be some technology, it could be some breakthrough research, it could be a change in political administration, it could be something like a pandemic. And let's not hope we have any more pandemics anytime soon. But those signals start to come together, and there's thousands of them interacting at any one point in time. And what happens, they start to collide. And the second part of this is looking for emergent trends. And trends tell us that the world's going to potentially be better, it's going to be more challenged, and we've got challenges to deal with, or incrementally changes year by year, just getting better and better and changing and really forcing us to feel uncomfortable and stepping into change ourselves. And the third part is where the rubber really starts to hit the road. And this is around scenario planning. What if in the year 2045 in the US Virgin Islands we see these people, these places, these technologies, these new ways of interacting, these new dynamics, these new products, these new technologies emerge, these new foundations to the way of our very living. And once we can do that, we can reflect that against the strategies that we've got set in place today. We can see the gaps. We can see how far away we are from certain things. We can start to imagine what we have to do to make progress towards these things. So as you go from signals to trends and scenarios, and you supercharge that strategic thinking, it's incredibly valuable. But the fourth piece, I think, is the most visceral and essential in anything that we do, and it's a deeply human capability of storytelling. Once you can tell a story of a future that we're starting to imagine and build out, and we can see what's going to be part of that in terms of the signals and trends, and we can see the dynamics, we can start to tell the story of the people and the places within it. And we can actually feel what a future is like. If you can feel what a future is like, it becomes real. When you can actually feel something is real, you can start to manifest and build your way towards that in a way that's very, very real. You can understand the different use cases, the different ways that people need to interact. So when we think about signals and trends and scenarios and stories, these are the core elements, the foundation of what we do as futures folk. Now, I'm actually going to start off by talking about the past. I think you need a bit of a historical perspective of how futures work in the long term, right? And I'm going to talk about the world's greatest technology futurist that the world's kind of forgotten. Does anyone know in the room who Douglas Engelbart is? So Douglas Engelbart, he left the army after the Second World War. He's an electrical engineer. He ended up in Stanford in the early 1960s. He wanted to build a center for augmented human capability. And what he did was he got some money from NASA, and he started thinking that the military-industrial complex of computers and computing at that point in time, which the computers are very large, a lot of punch cards, a lot of microprocessors were just being spoken about, and transistors were just starting to gain pace. And he started to think about what that could mean for us. So over a period of around about a decade, he and his team developed a number of different technologies that became an online system. And he went down to San Francisco in 1968 in December to demonstrate this online system. It's now called the mother of all demos, and you can see that online on YouTube. Anyway, here's just a clip. So his team invented a few pieces of pivotal personal computing technology. So desktop publishing, hypertext linking, early versions of the internet, the mouse, touchpads. They had to invent microwave modems to carry data from down the road in Stanford all the way to downtown San Francisco, so he could present to 1,000 people. They invented video conferencing, and I always sort of joke that it hasn't really improved that much in over 50 years, right? It's interesting, we were joking earlier as we were setting up my computer, we're still wrestling with this technology. The humanness of the struggle behind that is very real. But what was interesting was 1,000 people saw this. They were absolutely amazed. Their minds were blown. They stood up, Massive rapturous applause, and they went back to their jobs. Because this was a system that was a prototype, and how was that going to really gain pace? And hey, we're not going to have computers in every business around the country, and now we're in a world where we've got computers in everyone's pockets, right? What happened beyond that was some people in that audience and some people from his team, they jumped across to Xerox PARC. Palo Alto Research Center in Silicon Valley was an incredibly famous place for developments of a number of different kinds. And we all know who Xerox is, right? You know, photocopiers, right? Well, they built the Xerox Alto, which is really the world's first proper personal computer in the 1970s. And they gave like hundreds of demonstrations of this to various people, and the board of directors of Xerox were certain that the future of the company was slightly better photocopiers year by year, maybe some printers. The personal computer was cute and interesting, but it wasn't going to be anything significant, so they didn't put any more money behind it. It's incredibly frustrating for the team there. So they kept on giving demonstrations. They still had research money. They were really pouring their hearts and souls into this. And one day, a group of developers from a young startup in Silicon Valley came into the room and saw something that blew their minds. It triggered them to think differently about what they were doing and what they were doing to reimagine what personal computing could be like. And they said, we want to come back in the next couple of days with our CEO, and we want to show him this because we think that this is important. They go back to their office and they tell the CEO, who wasn't really interested, and they had to persuade him that this was an important thing to do. Hands up who knows who Steve Jobs is. Steve Jobs that day saw a demonstration, and this is what he said.
What we saw was incomplete. They'd done a bunch of things wrong, but we didn't know that. And within, 10 minutes, it was obvious to me that all computers would work like this.
The most consequential 10 minutes, I think, of anyone's lives, let alone Apple's life, right? He actually went back to the board of directors and to the executives in Xerox and said, are you going to do anything with this amazing technology? They're like, well, it's cute, it's interesting, but not really. He goes, can I give you some Apple stock? And I hope that they've still got it. Can I give you some stock? And they took it, they licensed it, and Microsoft took these ideas as well, and there's a big furore about this. But what was interesting was they developed over the years, and they developed the graphical user interface. They developed the mouse a little bit further. They developed Windows as an operating system, right? And then in 1984, they launched Macintosh. And they did that with one of the world's most famous advertisements. It's called 1984. It was directed by Ridley Scott, who'd just done Blade Runner a couple of years earlier, right? And it was this video of Big Brother and people falling into line, and they were marching because they were stuck in the mundanity and the non-creativity of computing, because it was mathematics and computing and the manipulation of numbers for creativity and smashing the system. And that advertisement was actually launched during the Super Bowl that year. It was a particularly interesting Super Bowl, but everyone in the world couldn't stop talking about this ad. Now, Steve Jobs and his creative team, Lee Clow down at Charter Day, and Ridley Scott, they put this all together, but they didn't ask permission. Steve Jobs didn't go to his board of directors to get the millions and millions of dollars, not only to make it, but to put it in a Super Bowl ad. And I'll tell you what, the board of directors was furious. Do you know why? The ad didn't show the computer. You spent all this money on an advertisement in prime time, and you didn't sell a computer. You sold an idea about what a future could be. Now, hands up who's used a Xerox copier in their lives, right? Hands up who's used one in the last 6 months. Hands up who's touched an Apple product in the last half an hour, right? Xerox, market cap today, if you own Xerox stock, I'm sorry, is about $160 million, like total market cap. $3.72 trillion market cap of Apple. When you see the signals, you understand the trends, you understand the use cases of how the world could be and the possibilities, it can become incredibly potent and not only change your life, but it can change the lives of literally billions of people. And this is like an extreme version of Future's work. But it shows that there's a focus and a clarity about what we do. But really what we have to do as executives and thinkers and entrepreneurs and innovators is lean into the development of imagination as a business tool, the development of anticipation for what comes next, and the deepening of empathy about who needs what and how they need it and where you need to deliver it at the right time, right? And this is the new playbook for executives. You know, I've taught 200 executives at a large French engineering company, global engineering company, how to write science fiction. And what's happened? They've come up with new business ideas and new business lines. They've fortified their sales strategy. They tell stories now, and it's a much more effective tool to be able to take people on that journey because they understand them. They've built empathy for them. But really, and most simply, what you can do to capture all these ideas, because there's a lot to process around thinking about the futures, is really just ask what if. What if the world changes? What if my world changes, my job, my industry, my island, you know, the US at large and also out in the world? What if that changes with all the dynamics of change that we see? So we're going to look at some signals, we're going to look at some trends, and we're going to ask ourselves some big what if questions as we're going to go through, so I hope you're ready. And what we're going to do at the end of this is we're going to have an opportunity for Q&A, and I'm going to sit down here. We're going to have a fireside chat. So I want you to think of some really tough questions or to challenge me. All of this is relevant. I'm not going to give you answers. I'm going to take you to places where there's possibilities that are going to change how you think about the world. Now, I like to frame how we look at the world. Global megatrends, those big things, and wow, there are some big things right now, sort of framing how the world's going to work. So economic shifts. Over the next 10 or so years, I think pre-2026, this was very real. We were going to be seeing China as number one economic power, USA number two, India number three. You know, hugely populous countries and like a real innovation powerhouse in the middle. Previously number one, right? You've got Indonesia number four. It's a huge country. It's incredibly pivotal and innovative around technology, around agriculture and the provision of food. And Germany, that likes to put regulations about everything, right? But what's really interesting is this is about innovation, this is about regulation, this is about really stepping forward. I think right now, a lot of this is uncertain. That uncertainty is something that, you know, we're following the signals and the trends of what's happening every day and wondering where we will land. And the fact is, we're going to land somewhere different, maybe even from this. We're going to see the flourishing of Africa, and sub-Saharan Africa is going to be 4.2 billion people by 2100. Lagos, Nigeria is going to be over 450 million people by 2040, 2050. And if you go into Lagos, it's going to be about 50 million people by 2050 and about 88 million people by 2100. In fact, 8 out of the 10 largest cities in the world will be in sub-Saharan Africa. Think about what innovation is needed in places with incredibly dense populations, right? But imagine the entrepreneurial spirit and imagine the creativity, imagine the invention, imagine the new systems and new ways of thinking that's going to be coming from places like this. I'm incredibly excited about places like that. I'm incredibly concerned about climate change, right? We live on an island. As the world warms beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade, we're going to see a world that's incredibly challenged. Now, this is the warming stripes from Ed Hawkins at the University of Reading in the UK. And this has got a slice of average temperature from the year 1850 to 2025. Right? And this is the global view, and you can go and you can type in warming stripes, and you'll find this website, and you can look at, you know, the region of the world that you're in. But it's a similar story, right? The world is getting warmer. There's more chaos in the weather systems as we start to see things changing. You know, global warming is real. That's a conversation that doesn't always go down very well in many parts of the world. And we just have to work out how to create resiliency, how to live in this world. And, you know, humans have been thriving in large populations for over 12,000 years. And we've been really surviving through very tough times. And really what we're going to be finding ourselves on is on the edge of change and on the edge of what I think is one of the most important focuses for the resiliency that we need to build. And that's around water, energy, and food. And over dinner last night, asking questions around this and living here in the US Virgin Islands, how many of you can agree that this might be the biggest challenge in the world that we face today, right? I think we walked into dinner and there was a power outage immediately. And it came back up. But then I heard that, you know, for like 18, 20 hours the day before, You know, we're right here. We're going to work out what resiliency means, right? Because scarcity of water affects the ability to generate electricity. Both of those things affect the ability to grow food. And we need to grow 50 to 60% more food by 2050, right? We have to have sovereignty around all of these, right? We have to have our own water, the ability to generate our own electricity, and the ability to have our own food. And on island ecosystems, and I've spoken on several, including Cayman, Curacao here, a number of other places, you know, we bring it in, right? Or we generate it ourselves, or try. Or we try and work out how that works in a resilient way. And it's difficult with legacy systems. And electricity is becoming like the main source of power. So it's interesting as we follow what's happening in the Middle East right now, which is a fight over natural resources, whereas within sort of 25 to 30 years, the picture of the world is going to be very different. What's really interesting is that for about 10 years, I didn't step into rooms with the oil and gas companies. And it's because they didn't want to listen to the fact that the world is changing. Now they're asking me to be in the room. We're talking about people like Shell and Interpipeline, Brookfield, and whatever. They want to talk about change. They want to prepare for transition. They want to think about things. I do so much talking about, you know, energy-specific keynotes. It's interesting because we're going to be in a world where the generation and the distribution of energy is going to be the most important thing, and that's going to be through electricity. Excuse me. Because we're sort of heading towards a world of the internet of energy. By about 2060, 2070, we're going to see a world interconnected by high transmission cables from continent to continent. We're going to see people generating their own renewable energy and providing that to places all over the world. It's going to be connected. It's already happening in Asia. It's already happening in the North Atlantic. It's already happening on the east coast of Canada. But as we start to connect all of these, the geopolitical theater of the late 2060s, 2070s is going to be around who can transmit the most energy from place to place. And we know things like AI and all the things that we need to build in this world and support in this world. This is going to be the backbone. So energy is still going to be important. It's just going to be around a model like this as well. Now, we talk about speculative futures, and sure, this is. But really, we're careering towards a world where this is a new dynamic. So what if we learn, unlearn, and relearn how the world transforms? Right? The way that it works today is not always going to be the way that it will always work. In fact, if we assume that, that's going to be the beginning of the end of our creativity, right? So I'm contractually obligated to talk about artificial intelligence. Right? We have to go down into this. Now, I talk about adaptive intelligence, in fact, superhuman adaptive intelligence, the fact that it's about us working with machines and us actually guiding them forward and them not necessarily guiding us. And there's lots of interesting narratives, but there's some very base facts around what we need to do. I was having a number of conversations about this earlier. You know, we gather data, it's painful, we know that, right? We turn that into usable information. And I spent over 20 years in data centers and running teams to do that, and it is painful, I've got the scars. Now, we add context, we add narrative, we make it useful for business, it becomes knowledge. That knowledge can be applied. But the human differentiation and the ability to gain a huge amount of pace behind what we're doing with that knowledge is really with wisdom. And what we've got in this room is a wisdom economy. As you can connect human experience of what worked, what didn't work, the journey that we've been on together or separately, and sharing that becomes collective knowledge. That collective knowledge and wisdom really drives us forward to make better decisions, right? So wisdom is the differentiator. Deeply human cannot be encoded no matter whatever tech billionaire wants to tell you, right? They just want to make you believe that the humanness can be built out of systems, whereas we need it now more than ever before. But we're at a tipping point. This is Max. This is my 5-year-old. He's got a broken shoulder right now, which is a shame. Anyway, this is us in Scottsdale, Arizona last year. We decided to take a Waymo. Has anyone taken a self-driving car at all, right? The most boring experience you can ever have with the most exciting technology you can ever think of, right? Why is it boring? It's a taxi. I've sped it up to make it more interesting. It drives pretty well. It actually drives a little bit like a human in a way. It's kind of dynamic and interesting. And that was going from Phoenix Zoo back to our hotel in Scotland. My son pretended to be a Waymo for the rest of the day as well. Now, this has been rolled out everywhere. I've ridden in Waymos in Austin, Texas, in Phoenix, in LA. It's gone to Houston, it's gone to Miami, and there's 700 of these vehicles on the streets in Scottsdale and Phoenix, Arizona, every day. I chatted to all the Uber drivers that I took in addition to this, and are you worried? He's like, not worried at all. Do you know what? I did this in LA as well. It was half the price of Uber. How do you take market share? And they're taking 20, 30% plus in these places by just being able to own the infrastructure to run it. And they're creating hundreds of petabytes of data every month. And what they're doing is they're scanning the world and using that in new content. The business model changes. It is a taxi. It's a data collection mechanism, and it's out in our wider world as well. And it's terribly boring. It's a tipping point. It's really interesting to find that AI is going to be not going to be necessarily a conversation piece in maybe 5 years' time, because it's just going to be everywhere. I mean, how many people talk about electricity every day as they walk around their homes or university? Well, they just use it, right? Yeah. Granted. Okay. I chose the wrong thing, right? Of all the things. Okay. No one talks, oh God, okay. But we're starting to see incredible things happen, and it is becoming commonplace. We're seeing Google DeepMind, using scans from irises to be able to do the prediction of disease. We're seeing drones. I was just in a conference in Curacao talking about drones in aviation, a number of other things. But in farming, it's doing incredible things. It's helping agronomists. It's helping farmers. And you've got people that are 70 years old operating drones and programming their run routes and their scanning routes. You've got people in construction like Hadrian X from Australia that's rethinking the entire system around building a house. You don't just throw automation at something. You rethink the brick, the design of the house, and how it builds things. That holistic view is how we need to think about the world. And interestingly enough, as I was driving around USVI, you've got several McDonald's here, right? I don't think that any kid in the next 10 years is going to be actually in these McDonald's flipping burgers or working in any of these places. I think that they're going to be people that are administrating fully autonomous McDonald's places, right? And these places, this was prototyped last year, didn't work very well. But that's the worst that it will ever work, because it will continuously improve. And what's really interesting is 4.9 million Americans work in quick service restaurants. There's a bigger dilemma when these technologies come to bear. The dilemma is, how do we educate these people? How do we level them up? How do we bring them into strategic, creative, and applied jobs in whole new ways? And this is some of the biggest dilemmas that we have to consider with all of this progress forward with automation and artificial intelligence. But what's really interesting, when we think about an organization, I want you to think about this as well, and we're thinking about how we operate in teams. We're going to be operating like octopuses. Now, octopi, I should say. Octopi, they've got the eyes and they've got the central processing brain, but they've got all the tentacles, and their tentacles have actually got neurons, and they can actually make intelligent decisions independent of the brain. But they actually pass data back to the brain that makes bigger decisions for its welfare and thriving as well. And an organization is now going to have distributed intelligence. That distributed intelligence is going to be a very different beast to actually manage. So there's a change coming in terms of how we think about the flattening of organizations, the giving of agencies to folks that actually drive hopeful change as well, and what we can do with this technology. And last year, at the World Economic Forum, you had people like Mark Benioff have these big discussions around what AI could deliver to us. And it could be a very different world that we have to put solutions into or manage ourselves, or the companies that we build.
We are the last CEOs who are only going to be managing humans as our workforce. That from this point forward, this is the marking, that we will be managing not only human workers, but also digital workers. That's just fascinating to me, that we are at that moment that we're going to say, yeah, this is when humans and AI are working together to create a higher level of success.
Yeah, high level of success, working in whole new ways. We're starting to see some of the solutions coming to bear. We're starting to see everything. Your coding is hugely transformed right now with Claude Code, enterprise workflows with agentic AI, customer service, and whatever. There's lots of things changing, lots of things happening, and fundamentally things are changing, much like when personal computers came into the office, right, all those decades ago. But I sort of talked a little bit about superhuman adaptive intelligence. There's been these big discussions around artificial general intelligence and how it's going to be able to do everything that we can do. And some of the biggest players like Yann LeCun that's just left Meta to run his own company that's raised billions of dollars, he talks about this. And this is really artificial intelligence doing stuff that we can't do incredibly well itself. And us doing the wisdom, creativity-driven, the decision-making, the new thinking, the through line, the drive for change, ourselves as well. That balance gives us that superhuman adaptive intelligence. And really, when you start to get on board with where we're going, we have to start thinking about using these tools, because they can be in our pockets, right? So hands up who uses ChatGPT, or Claude, or Gemini, or anything. Who uses it every day, right? We're starting to get there, right? You just use it for everything. I've just gone through a house renovation. I used it for a whole bunch of stuff like that. When my kid broke his arm 2 weeks ago, my wife was like, he's broken his shoulder. He's definitely broken his shoulder. I was like, just 1 minute. I just need to check something. Went into the other room. And I'm not joking. I'll check it on ChatGPT. Yeah, the symptoms say. Absolutely, we need to go to the hospital. Lessons. There's lessons in life. Always believe your wife is one of them, right? Always check the output, because fundamentally it hallucinates. Not everything is correct, and there's a high propensity for us to believe it, so we have to come back to that. We need to share the journey of what we do with it with many people to really work out what is valuable, and we need to elevate AI champions, because AI champions can live everywhere in organizations. One of the things I ask in these large audiences, and some audiences can be 3, 4, 5,000 people, I say, who uses it? Yes. Very much like this room. Who uses it every day? Yes. Who uses tools that aren't sanctioned for use in your organization for work that you do? And about a quarter of the room puts their hand up, because they're emboldened by the technology they've got access to think differently about the changes that are coming. Everyone's innovative in these contexts with these new tools, and that's what's really exciting. But I want to share a story about Paul Cunningham and Rosie. Now, this is an Australian IT entrepreneur. This is Rosie, his dog. Rosie had cancer, and he was heartbroken, and he went through treatments. He went through a number of months with no progress, and he was going to lose his best friend. So he went to ChatGPT. And what was really interesting was Paul actually sat down, and he realized that he could actually build his own vaccine for the cancer. And what he did was pretty exceptional. He went to ChatGPT and he tried to do an AI consultation. And then what happened was, from ChatGPT and Gemini, he actually was in conversation with the University of New South Wales, the Centre for Genomics over there, and they helped him do the genomic sequencing of his dog and of the cancer. It was an expert collaboration with them. And then they actually did some neoantigen identification using Google's AlphaFold, which is another part of AI, not generative AI, a different system. And then they did some mRNA vaccine design, as you do casually, right, using Grok. And then they custom manufactured it. A lot of the cost was actually sucked up by this institute, because they wanted to see this sort of grassroots, like citizen-driven, lot of innovation process. And then he administered the vaccine, and the dog got better, significantly so. Right? And the cancer and the tumor reduced by over 75%. It continues to go that way, and now he's going through another realm. Work this out. If you look at something like Moderna's mRNA vaccine for COVID, about $1.7 billion. I mean, sure, this was a one-of-one vaccine for his dog, right? And obviously it needs to go to billions of people for a larger vaccine. This was less. This was probably less. It was around about $5,000 in sunk costs in terms of licenses and ability to do the genomic sequencing, which is the most expensive part. And normally, if you're going to produce a one-of-one vaccine, $50,000 to $100,000. So even all in, You're probably less than $100,000 to do this, right? This is an absolute game changer of where we are and what's going to happen to every industry. And I showed this to a big pharmaceutical company a couple of weeks ago, and they almost fell off of their chairs, right? But think about what we can do with this to progress the world and change how we do things going forward. But we kind of have to stop, because as I said, we've got all this technology, and this magic technology is giving us these superpowers, this ability to do more. So we tend to believe that it's going to work all of the time. So we put our faith in it, and we cognitively outsource how we think about the world. Now, that's a dangerous thing. Now, I tell a story about a guy called Simon Verkart, and Simon Verkart is an art activist from Berlin. And Simon Verkart, on a Wednesday afternoon about 3 or 4 years ago, decided to run an experiment. He'd seen in Berlin that people were good drivers, but everyone was relying on Google Maps or Waze or some of these other systems. So what he did was he took a little red wagon and he put 99 smartphones in it. He connected all of them to the cellular network and then put them all to be on Google Maps, driving from point A to point B. And he walked across the Bridge of the Spree. Excuse me. He walked across the Bridge of the Spree. After about 10 minutes, the streets completely emptied in a part of Berlin which is normally busy. And he caused several different traffic jams across town. It's called the Google Maps hack, if you want to Google this. So what he did was he made the news, and people, for about 2 hours, he walked around fairly slowly and just emptied the streets. Why? Because he was walking at about 4 miles an hour with 99 cars in his little red wagon, because the algorithm told the application that that's what was happening. And no one ever questioned the truth behind something they became so reliant on, right? Hands up who uses Google Maps or anything out in the world, right? Hands up who's ever ignored it and deeply regretted the decision. I do this and my wife hates it, right? I've got a good relationship with my wife. It's going to seem like I don't after this. But I think differently about the world, and she sometimes likes it and definitely doesn't like it on other occasions, mostly when we're driving. But it's interesting, that cognitive outsourcing really reminds us that we have to determine how we use the technology and how that's sensible in the context, as we're driving our way forward in the world with wisdom, and not let the technology lead us. Big tech wants to give you the narrative, and they want you all to tell their story the way that they want it to be told. There are people that remix how the technology works, and that's what's really interesting as we see some of the players out there. So when we go back to looking at data, information, knowledge, and wisdom, really what we have to do is we still have to think about systems and process and governance as a huge opportunity down there. Getting things in order so that we can even do the work. But really focus on what leadership and culture means as we start to career into a world where we've got human-led artificial intelligence out in the world, changing how our world works. And as it disappears back into the scenes, how all of this starts to come out in a playbook and how this all starts to come out in the work that you do as innovators and entrepreneurs. But it's pretty easy when someone says, yeah, but what's intelligence and what's wisdom? Well, intelligence says that we can solve problems efficiently. Wisdom is understanding them meaningfully, right? Might be analytical, but we can integrate what we find and we can reflect on them. We can remix how we think about that. Effectiveness and accuracy, balance, compassion, sustainability. How can I succeed? What matters and how should I act? So this balance between intelligence and wisdom is going to be that mode, right? And we're going to be leading the way forward. What if we master data ecosystems and superhuman adaptive intelligence? Being masters of that world is going to fundamentally change how we approach the world and how the world operates. And after all the conversations, and I went back and I've been poring over this section all day, and it's like, what can I talk about in terms of island innovations? I mean, I live in Toronto, the fastest growing city in North America, 4.5 million people. But, I do get to travel. I do get to see a lot of different places. I had fantastic conversations yesterday. And over the years, I sort of realized, at the grassroots, what can we do and how can things change? if we get people on our side to believe that the world could be different, right? So really just highlighting a number of different areas. And I think the areas really coming back to, what I call HEART. And HEART is really just an acronym for human-centric design, entrepreneurial spirit, asset development for the greater good, renewable, repeatable, replicable, and technology-enabled connections, right? Makes sense, right? To have that heart at the center of what we do and how we think about the world. So let's talk about sustainability, the circular economy, the idea that we can look at the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Organizations are applying, a number of these, they're choosing a few of them, and what they're finding is that it's actually promoting a better commitment to the planet and sustainability, and it's actually helping them drive profits and growth in a much more sustainable manner as well. Now, this is incredibly complex. You can find more resources on this online. But then we're in a world where there's a huge amount of waste, and waste is a cultural artifact. So, we talk about recycling. We talk about the reduction of use of product. We talk about the reuse as well. But really, it's this overall circular economy that's potentially got up to like a $4 trillion opportunity by 2033. The next keynote I'm giving is going to be in Basel, Switzerland, just on the circular economy, with an engineering company that's trying to get thousands of its clients to think differently about the world. We're in a world where, if you think about this, plastics, and I'm guilty of this today, the plastics buried in the earth in landfill are twice the mass of all living mammals. We're kind of at a point where we need to change a little bit, right? And we need to think differently. But what does that think about when we start to look in a broader perspective? In Japan, there's a city called Kamikatsu. In Kamikatsu, they used to have an incinerator, and that used to produce CO2, and they used to burn their waste. And what they found was that they had new regulations that came in that they couldn't actually meet, the limits that they had to work within. So they actually created something called the 45 category systems, right? So we might have 2 or 3 categories of recycling. In Kamikatsu, they've got 45 categories of recycling. Now, they actually drive about 20 to 25% of all their waste into recycled sort of streams, right? And they try and work out how to use the rest in other responsible ways. But what you've got is you've got a whole movement in a city to drive forward, to deliver against regulation, and to really sort of evolve what that policy, evolve what that thinking actually means on a wider scale. Containers and container ships, we know about these. About 14% of the world's containers are never really being used in the world. So we can use this ourselves. This is a Waldorf school in California, and they actually added 10,000 square feet of usable space, educational space, in their school in about 3 days. Right? And you're starting to see that this is an interesting way to use the materials in whole new ways out in the world and applied in different contexts that are useful and valuable for what we need, right? Right? These container ships, container homes is continuing on. You can literally buy a container home for a couple of $1,000s on Amazon. I'm not sure if they ship to the US Virgin Islands. But it's interesting. There's a big furore, there's a big discussion, like wind turbines, right? The waste from wind turbines, the repurposing of that waste to be kids' playgrounds in the Netherlands as well. Materials have got multiple functions and multiple things that they can be used for beyond just trying to work out how to recycle difficult materials into like other built structures as well. And that's a theme that I think is really important to think about as we go forward. Then I was thinking about, how do we build out healthy communities? What are people doing out there in the world? Some fundamental projects that I love out there are thinking like with AI, what can we do to ensure that everyone gets the health care that they need and they deserve? This is a company out of China called Ping An Good. They've got about 2,200 of these kiosks all over Shanghai and in various rural communities. And you can step in and AI will diagnose your condition. And if it's easily diagnosable, then it will give you the prescription that you need. Or it will triage you and actually put you online within a couple of minutes with an actual doctor that will take it to the next level. And what this has done is it's used very simple technology in places where there's high traffic of people, where people, may not be feeling so great and do need this service more than ever before to have a healthy workforce, healthy families, healthy communities, to actually change the game, right? it's a high-tech solution, and these things are going to become a lot more relevant and a lot more applicable in the world. But in a very low-tech way, you can go to somewhere like Chicago, where they put love fridges on the streets, where they can put food, and they can put consumable food in fridges as well for people in the community that have got food left over, and for others to have access to that. And really, what does that do as well, right? Access to resources, both of those things. One very high-tech solution, one very low-tech solution, right? Then I started to think about the ocean and where we are. And there's really interesting things happening in the world in terms of, we've got all that data, we've got that information, and we've got that organized into the digital twins. A digital twin can really be a representation of the overall ecosystem. It can profile how the world was, and we can use that to really work out how we can better operate going forward as well. So the complex processes, their interactions, are really starting to sort of like be decoded in a way, and we can use that in whole new ways. Google's doing some really interesting stuff in terms of storm tracking as well. If you look at the blue lines, they've actually tracked what a storm might be. Right? This is just off of Australia. And pretty close. If you've got more accuracy about where landfall is going to happen and the such, like I know this happens out here in the Caribbean, this can be an incredibly useful tool for us, right? As we start to work out, what that actually means. So access to that technology, and a lot of these are open source platforms that are being put out there by the big tech companies. That's how you can tell if a big tech company is actually really, really doing good in the world, that they actually make it open and accessible. And open accessibility has actually led to students like yourselves inventing new kinds of robotics that can roam the oceans. This is from a British girl called Eleanor McIntosh. This is Gilbert, 2 L's. And what Gilbert does, these are 3D printed parts, and these are all electronics, and the waterproofing is there, and they can swim around, they can capture microplastics in the ocean. And did this as part of a hackathon. I just thought that this was really interesting. I'm going to share these slides later as well. We'll make sure that everyone gets these, and there's a QR code. Go and take a look. You can basically get all of the plans and build this yourself. That's the kind of thing I think that we need. That's the kind of progress and innovation that we look towards as being inspirational, right? Versus the billions of dollars that are going into AI platforms and such like. And when I started to think about the water, energy, food mix, that resilient infrastructure is sort of coming to bear. Interesting stat of the day, 12 quadrillion gallons of water lives in the atmosphere. So if you can actually do that atmospheric water generation, which is incredibly expensive from an electricity perspective, but you can actually generate water from that, you can become somewhat independent as well. And you add solar and other things to this, and you can become quite independent. This is down in California, about 1,135 liters of water per day. It's interesting when we start to think about how communities can be empowered with that. A community in Brooklyn have actually been building these microgrids. I know that solar is a big conversation here, right? Maybe it's a challenging conversation here. But in Brooklyn, they put it on their rooftops, and they basically pay almost nothing for the electricity that they actually generate. And they distribute it across buildings. They actually use blockchain to record the transactions. And then they sell a whole bunch of this back into the grid as well. So it's interesting that we're at this point where, the cost of solar has plummeted, and we've got access to this as well. And we've got people empowering new thinking about the overall ecosystem. So FarmPod does something really interesting. So container, right? And we've got microgreens and greens being grown up here, and down here is aquaponics, and we've got fish being raised down there, and the fish waste feeds the green growth at the top, right? And it's all being powered by solar. So these closed ecosystems are really interesting. They actually sell these to educational institutes to really understand how this dynamic is. But you're starting to see these. I think Singapore Airport has got something similar. You're starting to see this across cities around the world as well. Really interesting when we see these grassroots efforts. And then it was about power again, thinking about electricity, because I couldn't stop thinking about electricity, right? Thank you for the prompt. Okay. What's interesting is, I drove an electric vehicle for about 7 years. I drive plug-in hybrid electric. We know that batteries in electric vehicles they're not going to last forever, but they're really, really good for home storage. They're really, really good for storing electricity. And this company, B2U Storage Solutions, actually, they take these containers and they build racks of these for actual storage of electricity. So that circular economy keeps going forward as well. And imagine the ability to use that waste in a whole new ways that create resiliency in our communities as well. Because before I had dinner last night, before I understood the energy challenges of the USVI, this slide was prominent in my deck and ahead of everything else. It was like, imagine the world of electrification we can live in. But none of this works if we don't have the electricity, right? Yeah. So what's interesting is that we're getting to a point where it's very, very interesting around this. I'm a huge nerd around electrification. The Leap motor, TO3, catchy, from China, about $5,000 for an electric vehicle now. Range might not be huge, but I mean, how much range do you need in the USVI on a single day, right? Even in Toronto, like we only need about 30 kilometers of range to do the tasks that we need to do as a family. I spent about 11 years living in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and in Vancouver they've actually got float planes, I've seen float planes here, fully electric. You've got drones now that are flying, I learned about this last week, that are flying between islands in the Orkney Islands up in Scotland, delivering mail to people that used to only get mail once every 6 to 9 days. And they get mail every day now. Right? And now, now we've got flying cars. Where's my flying car? You're a futurist, right? So we've got companies like Joby, and we saw the current administration, US administration, basically give permission for a lot of companies to start deploying and thinking about how to make this a reality as well. Right? So there is an ecosystem at play. There is electricity supply at play, and it's going to be vitally important as we look forward. So as I sort of wrap this up, and before we jump into the fireside chat, going back to thinking about exploring futures, thinking about qualifying, is this real? Is this really going to be happening? There's something called Amara's law. Roy Amara was a very well-known futurist out of the Institute of the Future in California. And a number of decades ago, he came up with Amara's law, which is, in the short term, we tend to overestimate the impact of technology. Everything changes now, get on board. And we don't quite believe it. And sometimes we don't jump on board, and sometimes we don't invest. But generally, in the long term, we see that we underestimate the impact of technology as well, right? We saw that with the story around Xerox. They've written books on how Xerox didn't believe the personal computer was going to be significant, right? And how Kodak invented the digital camera, but then went bust in the 2010s because they really, they made billions off of the patent, but they didn't actually get behind it as an idea and as an innovative ecosystem. We Blockbuster in the US as well. I didn't think that the internet was going to disrupt video rental, right? So these things have to be bared in mind. So you might think some of the things I've spoken about might not come to pass, and you might be right in one way, but the fundamentals and ideas behind them live on in new products. And the reminder is that, the scanning of signals and the identification of trends is what we do as futurists and hope engineers. And the scenarios we explore help us fortify and build our strategies to be stronger. And the stories that we tell take us deeper. And the stories that I've told with clients, and I write science fiction with clients, has really helped them change how they think about the world. So I got to work with Google a few years ago in the pandemic about how the world was going to operate from a resiliency perspective. We did a number of very heavy studies that I can't tell you what we did. But just prior to the pandemic, we were looking at global regions and their importance over the next 20 to 50 years. And they started investing billions of dollars in Africa, a number of different places in Africa, based on that study and a number of other things that they were doing. I've worked on considered investment in terms of agriculture in Europe with companies like Ardo. And Ardo, they grow fruits and vegetables across a number of different countries in Europe. And I was doing a pre-briefing call halfway through the research that I was doing with Marika, the CEO at the time. And I was like, I found this research, I'm looking at global warming, and then I'm looking at Southern Europe. We're looking at, how catastrophic the summers are going to be and how difficult it is going to be to grow food. And she was like, what? We went down into it. She goes, we're flying to Spain in 2 days to make a significant multi-million-dollar investment in a growing region. Can you send me this? So I sent her all the raw data. We went through it. And they had much more considered, careful risk analysis and investment sort of profiles going into that place as well. Europe is going to get really interesting when you've got places like Spain where crops are failing, where Italy might not even be able to grow tomatoes. Imagine an Italian that won't be able to have tomatoes. It's a cultural catastrophe more than anything else. I also got to work on the future of chocolate with one of the world's largest chocolate companies. And what happens in 2050, 2060, 2080 when the cocoa supply is failing? Yeah? What do we do with these new technologies around fermentation, around cellular food? What do we do? I can't say more than that, right? But people are still going to want chocolate in 100 years' time, okay? Right? I really do feel that. And I started to think about, how we can do storytelling and we can think about visceral futures, and we've got tools at hand, right? So I put together, excuse me, the clicker's a little testy. So my friend's the head of futures at Lego, and she hates it when I do this. But so I go into ChatGPT and I say, create me a Lego box set, and I put in a whole number of different ideas. I put in a number of the ideas from this keynote. And create me a Lego box set. It takes less than 5 minutes to do all of this. And what this does is that is beautiful and it's inspirational, but you can go through this and start asking questions. Because what ChatGPT has done, it's gone out to the world of information that it's got, and it's just surfaced that in a way that it thinks 2050 will be. It's the gaps on what it will be and the questions that we ask that take our thinking beyond this. And that's really how we need to be thinking. And then thinking about big ideas, and I was like, okay, we were talking about energy, we're talking about the future, the Internet of Energy. What does that look like when we're actually thinking about the Caribbean? And maybe we can all work together. There's ideas like in Denmark, there's energy islands being built. It's a $30 billion project in the Atlantic Ocean. What happens when we come together in an agreement where all of the islands generate their electricity and all of them actually share that from island to island in a cooperative agreement? These big ideas sort of take our futures forward in whole new ways as well. This was tricky to even get to look sensible. In fact, a lot of it doesn't look sensible and there's lots of mistakes, but this is generative AI, right? But really, it sort of connects everything together and it's just provocative. It's a story about what our futures could be like. And really, this lecture and this conversation and the Q&A, it's an invitation to start the work today. There's no risk in thinking about the futures ahead of us. There's no risk because it's a cognitive task. Asking the big questions is actually an advantage. Not asking the questions and maintaining the status quo is a huge challenge. And there's 4 things that I want you to take away. Number 1, question your own history and perspectives. We've always done it this way. Is the beginning of the end of any kind of energy for change, right? We always know that we have to push that forward. We know that the world is going to be different, that today is different from 40 years ago, right, for example. Number 2, be wildly creative and collaborate. You can have a great idea on your own, but once you share that and you do that at scale, you can have greater ideas together. And we know that's foundational to the place where we're sat today, right? Number 3, shift your mindset from what is to what if. Looking up and just asking once a day, what if the world changes? You see a signal and a trend, you start to see that getting stronger. What does that do for my job, the university, the ecosystem I work in, the industries that I'm trying to serve? What if the world does change? And what if I can be a part of that change as well? And number 4, celebrate the work in progress that we make together. High hope organizations recognize the change that is happening, recognize the struggle that is happening, recognize the wisdom that is being applied. And high hope organizations drive more change. And futures work with that actually drive more profit and growth, market capitalization, and everything that we look for as we start to build out these innovation ecosystems. So I'm going to leave you behind with this. And we'll make sure that, 1, you get all the slides. 2, there's an online resource if you scan the QR code. And it's just got some provocative questions. It's got a number of tools, that are sort of open source tools out there in the world to start doing futures work. There's a number of podcasts that I listen to that I think are really cool and interesting. And there's also a challenge there called the Hopeful Futures Challenge. Just pick a signal from today or pick a couple and think about them and think about the impact in the world and then start to have those conversations and share those ideas. Because that's how we build the capabilities to become futurists, to be hope engineers, look at the possibilities and fundamentally change how we think and fundamentally change how the world operates. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I think we're going to, so hold fast. I don't know what happens next. There you go. Hold fast. We're going to be putting some chairs up here.
Yes, thank you so much. Let's hear it one more time for Nikolas Badminton. Thank you, thank you. So we're going to transition now. We're going to have a table and chairs right here. It's going to sort of be a fireside chat, right? Yeah. So you're going to be welcome to just open to questions, etc. But before we do that, we have some surprises for you. If you would stand up on your 2 feet. And look underneath your chairs.
Oh.
Underneath your chairs, we have some just gifts to say thank you for coming. If you find something, let us know. Lift it up. No. Anybody find anything? Who got something? Who? Yes, no? Tamara, was there something there? Okay, we got some prizes. All right. Excellent.
Let me know when you, good job.
All right.
Let me know when you want.
There are 3. There should be 3.
Sorry?
We got 2 so far. There's 1 more out there. Some gift certificates. So thank you for coming. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Nelson Pissarro. He is our distinguished professor of entrepreneurship. So he's going to handle the fireside chat.
Okay. You want to get, I'll go.
All right. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for coming again. So we have some questions for, if you have any questions for Nikolas, I'm going to guide you through the process. And if you don't, I have some questions that I asked ChatGPT to ask you.
Oh, come on. Come on now.
All right, guys. So please, any questions? Okay.
Good evening.
Hi. Can you get? When you ask the question from the audience, can you say your name and then ask your question? It's important. Okay. Thank you.
My name is Kelly Pugh. We're actually hosting a watch party in St. Croix at the UVA Artsy Park. So these come from St. Croix.
Great. Hi, St. Croix. Are they in that? Hey, St. Croix. Okay, gotcha.
I have a few.
Great.
Just ask one and then we can.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. Oh, yeah. Need the microphone if you're going to be online. Okay, let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kelly Pugh, representing St. Croix with these questions here. First question, based on current trends, including the oil-centric wars and our increasing reliance on and demand for AI and energy-dependent technologies, what might that reveal about where our energy future is headed in the next 10 to 15 years? Yeah. And which energy technologies are going to be the most popular or valuable in those next 10 to 15 years?
Right. So how is the current situation? I mean, it seems like when the word war is synonymous with energy resources in many cases. What we're seeing in terms of the dynamics is when you put a chokehold on resources, you work out another way forward because you don't have a choice, right? So what's happened now is, quite interestingly, is the searches online for electric vehicles have shot up in places like the United States because the price of gas is getting high. When it hits the pocket, it hits the heart and mind as well, right? You're going to start to see people finding, failing energy ecosystems and wanting to have that energy sovereignty themselves, that independence. So that's going to drive even more adoptions of things like solar. That's going to drive policy changes eventually, friends. And it's going to ensure that, the world does have that resiliency because you can't wait. I mean, again, you're right on the edge of the biggest challenges, right, that are out there. And you're sort of forced into a cycle, but eventually something breaks, right? And people in democratic society vote for change on occasion, and sometimes they don't because, people like nostalgia of the world and how it's always worked. But oftentimes these things that happen is that they're going to drive change. Now, there's a number of different energy technologies that are really interesting. I think geothermal is one of the most interesting there. Hey, we've got tons of people that know how to drill holes, right? We can drill, and we can do technical geothermal where we pump water down, we can tap into hot water seams. There's a huge amount of energy. Look to places like Iceland and the such like that are doing incredible things like that. You know, there's big seams of geothermal even under the Caribbean islands, right? So that's going to be a huge one. Solar is significant. There's a big conversation about nuclear. Nuclear fusion is getting really interesting. I'm still like lukewarm on nuclear as a whole. It's incredibly expensive infrastructure, and the cost per kilowatt hour is still very high for that. But yeah, run of river. What's interesting about energy is it's like every form of energy has got a role to play. And it's about what the application is. So you're going to see a diverse energy system. There's a slide in there that had a mix on it, and we're moving from this mix to that mix. And it's just going to be lots of different things doing things, right? So, for example, like shipping is reliant on fossil fuel-based energy and not battery power, right? But cars in cities could be around EVs and battery power, right? But as technology gets better and we work out how to get access to the minerals and the technologies that are just changing, battery technology especially, we're going to see huge changes come. I think the world in 40 years' time is going to be wildly different from where we are from an energy perspective. Not to say that oil and gas and those sort of fossil fuel resources won't exist. They're just going to be much diminished, right? That's why so many of the companies are calling me for conversations right now, right? Yeah, thank you for that question. Okay, there's a question in the room at the back. We get you the microphone. Can we bring up the lights in the room a little bit? We can see people.
Hi.
Yay. Thank you. That's better. Thank you.
Okay. No worries. Hi, my name's Amber to everyone, and I have a question. Hi, Dr. Rosario. Thank you for coming in. I think we're all self-selected here, so futurism and the idea of what's next is commonly embraced in this room.
Yep.
But as you're being hired, I think you mentioned it's a cognitive exercise and like it's a cognitive thought to think of what's next.
Yeah.
What is the greatest catalyst for these thoughts to be actualized, particularly that you've seen that's been successful in regions like the Caribbean?
What's the greatest catalyst? Generally,
Is it private? Is
yeah.
it public? What is the way to go from the thinking in this room to seeing those things effective in society?
Yeah, I mean, so this is when I say, think big and have a bigger vision, and the vision will carry you, and that will drive investment and whatever. The bottom line is you have to start seeing things happen. The fact is we have to start making small changes that start to prove that the route that we're going to follow is going to be, is going to bear fruit, is going to actually be something significant. It's like when ChatGPT was launched onto the world. Everyone was like, whoa, this is interesting. And it's like, well, this works in different ways. And it just exploded because the rest of the world saw that opportunity. Solar energy is interesting. Solar's been around for a long time. The first solar cell was developed in 1848 by Edmund Becquerel as a 19-year-old. The first rooftop solar was in New York City in about 1903. Now we're at a point where the materials that are used in the technology and the developments and the chemistry is now driving solar to like near marginal cost, zero marginal cost. So we're starting to see that. I mean, the bottom line, it comes down to, can I access, is it affordable, can I apply it, right? So the trouble is with futures work, you can be so far ahead. So what we do is we draw a picture and we tell the story of a future, and then we do something called backcasting, whereas we take steps back, like 5 to 10 years at a time, to work out what steps we need to take to get there. And what you find is, you find gaps in the strategy, and as you fill those gaps, you actually see more benefit from a monetary perspective, either in savings or in additional revenues, start to come from some of the fundamental things you do. And the more people that are following that route, the more that's happening. We're seeing a huge thing right now that's really interesting, and it's worth tracking as a signal, which is the the billions, if not trillions of dollars being poured into data center infrastructure in the United States. I think that we're going to find ourselves having run out of the amount of electricity that we need, the amount of land that we need, and the water that we need. Because the tech companies want unlimited amounts of all of it, but we need places to live, we need food to eat, and we need water to drink, we need water to operate in life. So you're also seeing a massive influx of change coming that can also take us down a path that's not necessarily going to be bearing fruit in the end as well. So we've got to follow some of those things as well. It comes back to a truth of what the world actually needs. Faster computers, sure, for a very small part of the world, right? But, you know, the person that tells you that the world needs to be purple will sell you purple paint until the end of days, right? Yeah, it's a great question. Again, I don't have any questions. I don't have any answers. Just like ways to think about it, right? Thank you. Hi, there's a question in the middle right here. Where's the mic? Where's the mic? Oh.
Just want to let everyone know because we're directly in front of the speaker, there's some processing on the mic to keep it from feeding back. So it's going to sound a
Little janky.
Yeah.
Yeah, all good.
Good evening, everyone. Patrice Williams-Gordon.
Hi.
My question is
Hold the microphone up a little higher.
My question is along the line of social and relational concepts.
Okay.
What are the great needs that we see emerging and the kind of solutions that we think we're going to have to battling with? Because, of course, with all this AI and social media stepped up,
Yeah.
but it has created its own monsters.
Yeah.
Now that we have AI and it has eliminated some of the social and relational interactions that we've had.
Sure.
What challenges do you see, and what are the possible solutions?
Yeah. So social innovation. Thank you for the question. It's the biggest global megatrend that I don't talk about often enough because it really opens a whole can of worms. Is multi-generational trauma. At the very basis of society is we're carrying the genetic memories. Epigenetics carries through the memories of our fathers and mothers and the traumas that they lived through, and their fathers and mothers and their fathers and mothers and whatever. The expression of the gene keeps us in a way fundamentally leaning into technology to act as soothers, right? Not actually leaning into family to act as soothers. Which we need, right? And what's really interesting is that there needs to be a lot more work done to solve, and I'm not talking about technology. I'm talking about ancient technology of everything from plant medicine all the way through to therapy and community to fix a lot of those societal challenges at a very base level. The challenge is everyone says we're going to build a website, follow us on social media, and then we can do that all together. Whereas actually there's some things that are a little bit more fundamental in the mix as well. And I spent an early part of my sort of futurist career speaking to a lot of people in that area, and I went through a number of transformations myself to sort of change who I am. A completely different person than I was in my 30s today as a 53-year-old. And it's important to do that because we want to ensure that our children have got the best foundation going forward. I think it's really interesting and it's a strong signal, and I think that it's important to know that our children are going to be limited access to social media platforms. It's happened in Australia. It's difficult to police. I think Canadians have just got access to TikTok again, right? What's interesting is we're going to see that kids should be restricted from playing Roblox because it teaches them gambling mechanisms and there's predators on the platform. Access to social media algorithms that program their dopamine receptors to expect constant reward from the click, right? Again, I don't have any solutions, but we do have that multi-generational trauma that needs to be invested in as a solution at a societal level, and then we need to put the safeguards around all this technology. Technology is not bad. The algorithms are built to extract as much value from us. We are working for the tech companies because the platforms are free, and they're monetizing us because we've signed the terms and conditions. The happiest people in the world don't use social media. Discuss. Okay. There's lots of questions now. Okay, let's start at the front and we'll work our way back. Hi. Whoa.
Sorry. Tyrone Webster Reed.
Hi.
And what would you say to the people that believe or have been observing that there's been an untethering of technological advance and the quality of life increase for the average person or global citizen? And as a part two of that, with regards to extraction, what is your approach when you're in these rooms with these insatiable CEOs, specifically in the tech sector? We know the archetype of the psychopath tech CEO. Like, what is your approach there? Or a guiding philosophy?
Okay, two parts to the question. The untethering of technology to human betterment, and the second one was what do I do when I'm in a room with high-tech execs that just want to encode the world. Generally don't speak in those rooms with those high-tech executives because they want people that are tap dancing inside the echo chamber, right? And you do have conferences where it's like, yay, technology, AI, the world's changing, and fundamentally they're just feeding their own ecosystems of investment and change in the narrative that they want the world to operate in, which is incredibly dangerous. The other question is really interesting when we detail the sort of human flourishing from the progress and the acceleration of technology, so it leaps ahead of us and wants to drag it with us. It's incredibly, incredibly dangerous. There's a term in futures work called technological colonization. That we are given technological platforms that tell us how to live our lives. The world's been built with war and taxes. So at a very fundamental level, we're kind of living in that world, right? It's still being played out today. We see it all over the news. Technological colonization is a veneer on top of that literally is like, this is who you are online. This is what you like. This is your favorite picture because everyone's told you it's your favorite picture. This is the music you're going to love, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there's some new narratives that came out in the last 6 months. President ChatGPT came up and he said, GDP is not going to be based on natural resources or the flourishing of economies. It's going to be based on compute. The amount of compute that a country has. Why did he say that? Because he wants all the water, energy, and land to be able to build data centers because AI is the future, right? If I'm in a room with these people that are doing, sustaining these big narratives, I generally take them into smaller rooms and we generally do a lot deeper work together. But hey, they're chasing the money from the investors and the investors are waving flags and saying, hey, we want to invest in robotics or AI or whatever. Look for the investors that are investing in social good and social change, right? They're going to be the ones that really inherit some very significant things, I think, in the next few decades as well. And that water, energy, food, why hasn't someone like Meta or Google mastered water, energy, and food? They can't. Complex systems that are too high risk, that are too essential for humanity. If humanity can break the chains of these tech platforms, get back to fundamentals, I tell you what, Google running water, energy, food systems or the such like is going to become commonplace. Do you know what? The world's going to be good for it as well, because fundamentally they'll have the money to make the change happen quicker. Thanks for the question. Okay, we're going to back. Are we using microphones or should we just get people to shout?
Check.
Okay.
Microphone check.
I think once I put it back in front of us, so if you want to come a little more to the left, it's a process. I can just speak louder. Go for it.
If you want.
I'm not one of those evil tech CEOs.
Cool. What's your name?
So my question for you.
What's your name?
Sean Snyder.
Hi, Sean.
I run Zinus software.
Cool. I'm pretty sure you're not evil, though.
Well, we'll see. Here are a question for you. So what signals or weak trends are you seeing today that most CEOs are still overlooking? And but will materially impact business models in the next 5 years?
What signals and trends, and weak signals particularly, am I seeing that are going to impact business models? I mean, We're on a particular trajectory that the world is being digitized. The technology is going to be the backbone, and yes, it's going to be important. I think one of the things that isn't being paid attention to as much as it should do is what technology looks like when it just disappears into the fundamental fabric of society, and actually the humanity, the wisdom, and the human flourishing start to rise above that, and the social systems that are going to be needed, and how we willfully and responsibly support that using our technologies versus giving things away for free. I think that people are going to be paying for more platforms going forward because they're not going to want to sell their data. They're not going to want to give away their humanity in a way so it can be encoded so that it can be sold back to them in terms of widgets and ads, right? I think that those two things, the quietening of the technology and the raising of the human flourishing, but I do think that people are going to be paying for platforms more and more. We're starting to see that as an evidence within people using AI platforms, right? They're starting to pay for usage until OpenAI come up with their ad-driven model or whatever, right? There's some of the fundamentals there. Plus, going back into the big structural elements of the world, water, energy, food, I actually think that the global electricity and energy ecosystem is going to have a fundamental and significant reckoning in the next 20 to 25 years. And I think it's a really difficult ecosystem to get into at a startup level, right? But what you can do is try and have influence in terms of new creative ways that renewable energy ecosystems can be deployed at scale in a decentralized fashion. So we do have that personal sovereignty, whether it's industrially, whether it's educational institute, or whether it's on a personal living perspective as well. That's what I'm saying right now. And the circular economy and sustainability is getting very, very strong. It's going to be, policy and regulation is going to come in very, very hard to a lot of places, and it's going to make it very difficult to be wasteful. And the world is very, very wasteful today. Yeah. Thank you, Sean. Sean? Thank you. I don't think you're evil. Evil tech entrepreneurs don't call themselves evil. Thank you.
But I want to get back to one thing that you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
which is plastics.
What's your name?
Ben.
Nice to meet you, Ben. Yeah. Plastics, yes.
Yeah, plastic is influencing all of us.
Yes.
In our future, in several ways, it's
Yeah.
influencing all of us.
Yeah.
And I've learned that the oil companies have a goal of doubling their
Correct.
production of
Yes.
plastics by 2050.
That's right.
Are the CEOs that you're talking to willing to listen to how they might want to change their goal as it impacts the whole world, everybody in the world?
So I was on stage in the Netherlands about 7 or 8 weeks ago, speaking to a large agricultural bank out there called Rabobank, and the CEO was on stage, and he said, "I've just gotten back from Davos. I've just got back from the World Economic Forum, and no one was talking about sustainability, right? Because it's inconvenient. It's difficult. You know, I've also worked with people like Paul Polman, who's the ex-CEO of Unilever, who helped build out sustainable brands, which is like 75% of their revenues, right? So there's a lot of people, and we've still got a problem. I've still got a problem with plastic. This is amazing product, right? It's just that we throw it away. We have it, we throw it oftentimes. We carry it 2 meters and then throw it away, right? What's really interesting is there's some really cool stuff happening with AlphaFold and AI being able to work out new enzymes to break down plastics and whatever. So I think that there's going to be a lot happening to try and redress a lot of the challenges we're finding. But with something like plastics, with something like sustainability and changing from that, there are opportunities to use different products. It's just that this is a scale of cost that is so low, and production. And the reason that the oil companies are doubling all of their targets is because you saw the squeeze on the oil and gas market as we head towards 2050. They're not going to be selling oil and gas for burning in vehicles and heavy industry. That's why they're doing it. More miracle plastics, right? But there are opportunities of working out the next stage in life for this, or the reuse of products. And any product that says X percentage is recycled plastic, it's still going to end up in a landfill, and they're only going halfway on a promise of being green. So watch out for the greenwashing out there as well. I was on a call. So I had a friend. She was the CEO. She was the lead futurist for a large fast food company, a significant fast food company. And as a futurist, she was like, "Oh, do you have any research on this and this and this on sustainability?" I was like, yeah. Let me send you some links. Happy to have a phone call. I was like, great. So she said, "Oh, have a call in a couple of weeks." She set up the meeting, and then she sent me a text message about half an hour before the meeting. She goes, yeah, we're just getting set up in the 2 rooms we've got. There's 60 people that are going to be on the call. I'm like, what? She did an impromptu, sneaky free lecture for 60 people. So what it gave me was an opportunity to chat to some of the chief sustainability folks in there and talk about the life cycle of a paper bag. When you can tell the story of something, it becomes more visceral and real. You go to the front of this restaurant, and they say, "What do you want?" "I'd like this kind of meal with this and that," and they put it in a bag, and you carry that bag to a table that's like 3 meters away. You take everything out of the bag, you eat everything, you take that bag, and you put it into the trash 2 meters away from there. The life cycle of that bag is like 7 meters travel and waste that could have been avoided, right? And the next question from this chief sustainability officer was like, "Yeah, but what can we do when management won't listen?" It's like relentless push and drive to make sure that they do listen. It's still not happening in that organization. But there's lots of small things that we can do to make better decisions that fundamentally will change the world at scale, right? It's a big question. Thank you. But plastics, we're surrounded, right? It's great. It's still going to live in the world. It's still going to have application. We've got to make sure that it's not single use, right? People are mad about it in the industry that uses these. Mad about it. Plastic straws. Getting rid of plastic straws in Canada. And I've spoken at conferences where people were spitting mad. And it's like, then you talk to them about all of the waste, and they're upset because you're calling their child ugly, right? But sometimes children are ugly. I mean that metaphorically from an industry perspective. Hi. Oh, let's go over here. Like, I saw your hand go up first.
My name's Shannon.
Hi.
And I have some more questions regarding the sustainability of the economy and how you view it from your perspective. So I know EV has been so un-Chinese, right?
Hi.
So like, there's so much EV happening in China.
There is.
We're not really talking about recycling of batteries.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of Chinese companies are looking into sodium-based.
That's right.
batteries.
Ion sodium, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's still a far way off from lithium-based, and we're running out of lithium at one point. And
Yeah.
I just want to understand how can we incentivize public sectors and private sectors to find value in, protecting them.
Recycling them. Interesting. Batteries, quick battery deep dive. Lithium ion, invented at the University of Texas. Sodium ion, invented at the University of Texas. Amazing professors out there doing incredible work. And that is fundamentally going to change the game in terms of thinking about using sodium as a material instead of lithium as well. And there's big discussions around lithium. I absolutely guarantee you there are companies in China that are absolutely working out the circular economy of the reuse of EV batteries. Chinese entrepreneurs and Asian entrepreneurs think in millennia. They don't think in like quarters or yearly reports. Absolutely guarantee. The oldest company in the world is in Japan. It's 1,400 years old. It's a construction company, right? SoftBank, also out of Japan. And I'm including Asia, Japan, Asia, China. But generally the philosophy, if you go back and you look at literature that guides strategic guidance, Lao Tzu, like Sun Tzu, and a number of different philosophical thinkers teach you strategic ideas of longevity of thinking. People are thinking in hundreds of years. So Masayoshi Son, the CEO of SoftBank, has got a 300-year strategy. And the strategy begins with a 35-year strategy that then can carry on, through the ages. And it's really interesting. So when you might see, in China right now, you're seeing a huge flourishing in terms of EVs. So you're seeing more out there than maybe being recycled. But there's money in those hills. One of the most resourceful countries in the world is China in terms of working out entire new economies of scale behind the reuse of materials, right? And we're seeing it's like the electric vehicle that's like $5,000–6,000. And the door's shut in some countries to those vehicles, and you've got countries like Norway that I think they sold like 3 internal combustion engine vehicles in the first quarter of this year, right? And I think it's going to be almost none because they've done policy and regulation. EVs are just prevalent. Yeah, it's interesting. So don't underestimate what China can deliver, I think. Yeah, is that okay? Yeah. You got a follow-up question? Okay, I think there's other questions. Come see me afterwards for the follow-up question. Okay. Thank you. Hi.
Good evening. Okay, let me sound less like a bot. Good evening, Dara Monifa Cooper, Conch Shell Media, and the USVI Agribusiness Consultant.
Okay.
We're testing his theory about the speaker.
Stand behind the wall. No. Just shout and I'll repeat. Okay, thank you.
Test.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, good evening. I'm Dara Monifa Cooper, Council Media, and the Agribusiness Consultant here in the Virgin Islands.
Hi.
Under the Small Business Development Center.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
curious, because I dabble in AI and teach technology and different things, mainly to farmers, seniors, and others in the
Yeah.
community. What promising examples have you seen or heard of, if you haven't seen for yourself, with communities that mitigate AI's potential environmental impact, the negative impact, while establishing guardrails for responsible, sustainable use? So there's a checklist that I tend to use
Yeah.
in terms of here's when you should and could use AI, but here's probably when you should use it every
Right.
day. And some of it is more harmful than others, so it's not like everything's
Yeah.
burning things down and using up all the water. But have you seen communities that have been able to find a way to at least start from now,
Yeah.
mitigating that before it gets to
I mean, the narrative is go all in, right? But what we're finding is year 3, year 4 of this journey of large language models and access to ChatGPT, Claude, or whatever. People are actually finding that people in business, there's 2 things happening from a psychological perspective and a productivity perspective. One is if you give someone a tool to be able to do more, they're going to do more and work harder, they're going to burn out. Right, because it's a relentless well of information, and there's all sorts of stresses and burnout that go with that. So you have to bring it back, and there's actually research that shows it's about 15 to 17% of tasks with AI applied to it is the right balance to cause a productivity uptick. And it's because there's just, like you said, there's some tasks that are built for this, right? So, for example, I've just written a book. And I told my wife, I need to go away for 10 days to a cabin and fish and write. It was awesome. And I produced the equivalent of 3 books in terms of output from LLMs. And I used precisely less than 1% of what it gave me, right? Because it takes you in multiple directions and whatever. But can it write me a good email? Can it do me a quick analysis on some sales numbers? Can it do some calculations that are complex? Can it do some adversarial scenario planning work with me quickly at the beginning of the work? Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it is anecdotal, right, out in the world. But the legal profession is now working out it's really good at processing massive amounts of information, and what they're doing is, 80% of the time as a lawyer is in the weeds and processing information for 20% of the strategic work that you do following that. It's being flipped on its head, and the Harvard Business School has got some research around it. It's being flipped on its head. You only spend 20% of your time in the data and 80% on the strategy, and that strategic work is deeply human, right? So we're starting to work out how this operates. AI is kind of unique in the fact that it's so good, or appearingly so good at doing things. And remember that it's built to make you feel good when you use it, just like social media, right? You know, I once encoded an entire keynote and put it in. It's like, you know, criticize this. It's like, you did a great job, you know. And then you have to get really adversarial with it. And then it didn't actually help, right? But so you know, people are starting to work out in professions like law, which is information heavy, how it's being used usefully. They're working out in pharmaceutical workflows, right, and supply chain, where it's useful. The flip side of this is it's going to come down to, I thought it was just $20 a month to be able to use this. Tokens and the amount of usage is charged. I did a quick back of a napkin sort of calculation on a large logistics company in the US that wanted to take 110 managers of on-ramp, off-ramp logistics operations and deploy AI to make a change. And you have to find like an additional $200,000 to $300,000 a year in savings or additional revenue to even just pay for the base capability. And that's before you're talking about the administration and the support of systems and whatever. People start to realize this is complex systems, and this is actually, it's still a technology transformation project. They're going to work out what are the simple things that it can do very effectively, and it will use it for them, and they'll still push through. And I actually think that they'll end up with that uplift in that hockey stick of productivity, right? So a lot of anecdotal stuff, a lot of sort of research out there, psychological effects and research happening. I do think that we'll find our way of working out what works and what doesn't work. Because right now the narrative is everyone's jobs, hundreds of millions of people are going to be out of work. I think it's a false narrative. And it's that hype piece that isn't useful. And it's often told to you by management consultancies that want to sell you services, or big tech companies that want to sell you more hardware, software, and such like.
Okay, we have 3 more questions. Okay, so the 2.
You haven't asked me a question either.
I have, but I will do the last one.
It's a fireside chat. And I'm sorry, Dr.
I will do the
Fazario.
last one, okay?
I'm sorry.
Great questions, so I don't need to.
This is an awesome audience, by the way. This is like engaged, and I wouldn't expect anything less.
Okay, let's
Great.
have these 2 here and that one there, the last one, okay? So, because I know you're waiting. 1, 2, and 3. Okay.
Come see me afterwards for a chit chat as well, yeah? And one thing after this all as well, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can find me at futurist.com. It's Nikolas@futurist.com. You can email me with questions. I answer them. I'm a human. Yeah, thank you. Hi.
Hi, my name is Imani Daniel.
Hello.
I'm also a self-proclaimed futurist, so this is great.
Hooray.
Also a social impact architect at all
Sure.
levels, grassroots all the way up to government structure design, okay?
Great.
Essentially my whole life. So this place is where resilience is over-extracted.
Yeah.
And so what does it look like to continue to engineer and maintain hope without placing an additional burden where we are already carrying the system?
Ooh. We are already carrying the system. We're not carrying the system, we are the system.
I meant specifically here in the Virgin Islands.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, sorry.
By carrying the system, what do you mean? You like in terms of you're patient with it?
I think we're very impatient. I mean,
Yeah.
like, infrastructure is
Patience is the wrong word.
We're also being burdened with visioning the future, resourcing the present, resourcing the future, designing it with lack of technical, and you know, it's a lot in a resource and geographically constrained place.
We suffer and we're told to fix it, but we don't have the resources and the ability to fix it, so there's a gap, right?
And a dual duty, a double duty of present urgency and future hope.
Yeah. I mean, you know, so there's a couple of, just from a industry or a company perspective, a company that works in futures work and builds the vigilance and asks the questions and builds possible futures, right, has got more, has got more of a right to play a part in that future that, as it unfolds, than someone that's watching from the sidelines. In fact, the people that are watching from the sidelines are generally going out of business. Yeah. So there's a thinking from Jeff Bezos. Back in the day, there was an earnings call, and there's day one and day two companies. I don't know if anyone knows this idea. Day one company is constantly evolving, constantly innovating, being vigilant, understanding the current situation and how it can be improved. A day two company is about stasis and maintaining market share. And it's the beginning of a long, slow descent into obsolescence and eventual death. I paraphrase what he said, but it was kind of that heavy, right? But now what you're talking about is we're here in an ecosystem where we suffer a system. Patience was the wrong word. Let's use suffer, right? Where we suffer a system that we have to use, and we're asked to come up with a future solution. Hope is actually something which is a recognition of who we need to put in power to make changes happen on a structural level and to give that agency to those folks. And it's not easy. And you're part of a very large country as well, with the US, where it's incredibly difficult. And I see these systemic problems. So, for example, energy ecosystems in the US, there's 120,000 miles of high transmission lines and 500 companies that manage them. You don't have a national supergrid. You don't even have statewide supergrids. And oftentimes you've got states that are collapsing in terms of like freak weather conditions and whatever we saw in Texas, and nuclear capabilities and renewable. So we're like creating the backbone versus oil and gas, right? I don't have an answer for you in terms of how to solve it apart from constant pressure in the democratic process and hopefully attracting the right beneficiaries to the island that see this as a massive opportunity. It's really tough, and I think it's a story that we're seeing in a lot of the islands across the Caribbean. Look at what's happening in Cuba. So Cuba's really interesting. I got to travel to Cuba about 20 years ago. And what was interesting was the resiliency of a nation that had to reinvent and had to recycle and had to reuse and had to repurpose everything that it had and had to reconfigure itself to work in different ways. And it's constantly under pressure, and we see what's happening in terms of, it's got exports like cigars, it's got tourism and whatever, and that's been killed by the current like energy blockades and whatever, right? But there's something to remember is with focus and dedication, the human condition is to fight through the most difficult times together. We hope that in a democratic society that means that people will be put in charge that will make that change happen. I've got more conversations to be had around that, and it's really interesting, right? Somewhere like China is making huge strides and bounds, and it's being driven forward faster than ever before because it's a totalitarian dictatorship. I don't want to frame China in the wrong way, but Xi is telling them what to do and they're doing it, right? And he's making big strategic decisions on how the world should work, right? And they don't have oil reserves, so it's easy for him to do that. Yeah, it's a big conversation area. Okay.
It is. Thank you. So good evening, Ridali Hodge Jr.
Good evening.
What are your thoughts on digital feudalism?
Digital feudalism?
Yes.
Okay.
As we slowly stumble closer to a ready-player one world and blockchain technology.
Where the entire world becomes a game through digital technology. Is that what we're talking about?
Part of it.
Digital feudalism. What do we mean by? Can I just get a definition of digital feudalism? Yeah. Can you do it without looking at your phone?
Yeah. So it's basically the thought that we are entering a feudalistic state, that the tech companies are going to be the feudal lords.
Yeah.
Right. So we have going to be under the control of an Apple or a Microsoft.
Sure.
You just serve as the worker for that company, as a content creator or somebody that's inputting.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about digital colonialism earlier. It's a similar idea, right? But different. So what you're saying is potentially you've got people that are working in a feudal dynamic where potentially they're pitting people against each other because you've chosen sides, right? I like to think that we're not operating in a world like that. I think that society naturally forms itself into groups. I think when it comes to technology, you've got platforms of choice. A lot of government, for example, are Microsoft platforms. So everyone's like within that world. You've got other people that are Google platforms. You've got other people that use open source software and open source LLMs and a number of different things. And I don't think that we're heading towards a Ready Player One world where we're suddenly plugging into the Matrix or whatever and fundamentally subsuming into a particular overarching system. But we're kind of on the edge of nearly getting there, right? Because human emotions are real, and they have been for millennia, and how we act and how we react to whatever. Technology and the tech companies have worked out how to play on that. To get reaction. I actually think that what's going to happen is, and I would certainly like to see this, is that as members of society or parents of kids, we're going to basically teach those folks to live in a world where there's less need for digital connectivity as a proxy for our emotional emotional sort of representation in the world, but also the expression of who we are as humans. I would hope that. A lot of people are lost in the mix, and there's still that big piece around multi-generational trauma that we need to fix as well. I don't think we're heading into like the plug-in matrix, turn off. But there's lots of people in the world that will make that choice, and there's whole economies based around that as well. And I think that the world's a mix. Ready Player One's a great book, right? It's an interesting idea. The Matrix is interesting as well as an idea.
Nick,
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for having this talk on my birthday.
Oh! Happy birthday. What's your name?
Miguel.
Miguel.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Happy birthday.
What role do you see yourself? How do you hold yourself in integrity with a role that looks or contrasts convenience with materiality? So you have a AI amplified overconsumption and extraction of resources that drives toward convenience, but also materiality. So when you talk about you talk about circular economy, and you also talk about human-centric. How does beyond circular economy and beyond human-centric, so if you were to push life-centric, not only human, but all life-centric, and instead of circular economy, what if it would be like donut economy, for example, because you're looking at ecosystems, you're looking at place source variables and all that. So how do you hold yourself in integrity when you do these events and carry yourself trying to touch leverage points and nodal interventions around the world?
How do I maintain integrity when we're looking beyond the current situation to potentially futures beyond the futures that potentially got bigger benefits and bigger possibilities? Well, we kind of do that, and that's a heavy question. Thank you, Miguel, for asking that. How to answer that question? My personal integrity is that so activism, right? I think that futurism is, okay, I'm going to stand up for this, because I need to get some water, for one. Futurism is activism, right? Now, we know that activists are really good at standing outside of the city hall and banging on the door and demanding change, quietly doing it inside the boardrooms and inside the organizations, and feeding them the information that they need to hear and the new ideas that are fundamentally different from what they're thinking today. You literally only need one or two people within that organization to make a significant decision that's going to fundamentally change the future of that trajectory. Or what I've found is those people leave and they build their own companies and take on the companies that they just left. I've actually given lectures, and I've actually been in rooms where people have gone to build something else because they've seen something that's different. I've also been in rooms where I've spoken to people that have fundamentally changed business processes and practices because now they've got a new focus and they've gone deeper. It's like this engineering company that taught themselves, that taught the exec to think about signals and trends and scenarios and stories, but then to write science fiction, fundamentally changed how they communicate with their clients, build value propositions, and build entire new lines of business as well. I mean, for me, that's integrity, right? Never just accepting that that's the way it is. I once had a call with a large oil and gas infrastructure company. They run many pipelines across North America. And they invited 19 people to one of the pre-briefing calls. And the CEO just said, don't come in and tell us that we're bad people. Organizations know their problems. They want to know opportunities and solutions that they could potentially explore together. That's what I'm finding. So it's not an integrity thing. For me, it's always being willing to stand in a room with people that aren't going to agree with you and fundamentally trying to change their mind a little bit. And some of the people are just going to retire because it's not their problem anymore. And eventually, all those people die and the world changes its order of operation, right? Discuss. I always end up at this point in a keynote. I always end up at this point in a fireside chat. It always ends up with, eventually the bad people have to go away, right?
Okay, I have one question.
Okay, we're going to stand up for this.
Yeah, okay.
The
and that
energy.
question is related, actually, to something that we did a few months ago here at UVI, which was the Innovation Studio. And that program was intended to build a sense of collaboration, right? And you mentioned in one or two slides collaboration. And my question is, how can we build that sense of collaboration? Because it feels like if we don't have that, we don't have a future.
Yeah.
Because it's all about community.
Yeah. When I talk about high hope mindsets, and I've done the research around this, a recognition of achievement, it comes before any sort of collaboration and cohesion and progress, right? People are working real hard, right? People are making progress themselves. Recognizing that you've done something actually contributes to the overall learning and the overall drive, it starts to build that hope. And that high hope mindset actually drives an energy for change that really is fundamental at a psychological level of an organization. It's a lot easier to collaborate with a lot of people that feel that you're listening to them. That's what I find. And that's what I found with some of the research I've been doing as well. Okay. Yeah, that's what I think. And because you can force collaboration, never really works as well as listening and recognizing the success of everyone, including your competitors, right? I tell many companies to get in the room with each other and to not think of themselves as competitors, to think of themselves progressing. I think, what was it, Sam Altman and Dario Almudi from Claude, from Anthropic. Everyone holding hands in the air except those two guys. Screw those guys, let's be honest. It's like, that's wrong. But recognition of achievements and really wishing that the whole world sort of rises together builds that hope. That's what we need. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. You can connect with me, like LinkedIn, you can email me, come chat to me now. What is it? Is it 10:30 at night? No, we're good. It's like 9:30. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your time.